I came back to the province in the thick of the rainy season, when the air hung heavy with the scent of wet soil and wood smoke, and the frogs outside croaked so loud it sounded like some broken orchestra warming up. I hadn't been back in years, not since the Christmas before college started, and stepping off the jeepney with my duffel bag and aching shoulders felt like dropping into a dream I half remembered, the kind where everything's familiar but wrong in ways you can't quite put your finger on. Lola was already waiting at the gate, her frame thinner than I remembered, silver hair tied into a loose bun, still wearing her faded green duster and holding that worn straw fan she used even when it wasn't hot. Her smile broke into something halfway between joy and worry, and her eyes, dark as burned sugar, scanned me like she was counting bones. "Gabriel," she said softly, reaching up to press a hand to my cheek. "You got too thin. You look like a Manila ghost." "I'm fine, Lola," I muttered, forcing a grin. "Just a rough month." She didn't ask questions. Never had. My mother used to say Lola had a way of reading between words, of knowing the things you didn't want to say. She just nodded and ushered me inside. The house hadn't changed. Same crooked bamboo walls patched in places with plywood, the same open kitchen facing the rice fields out back. The floors creaked the same way they used to when I had run barefoot as a kid, and the altar above the TV still had that dusty statue of Santo Niño next to a bottle of coconut oil and 3 melted candles. A few pictures were missing from the shelf, though. My grandfather's smile no longer peered down from the corner frame. I didn't ask. I spent the first night listening to the chorus of crickets and frogs through the slats in the window, sweating under a mosquito net and wishing I had never quit my job before lining up the next one. I told Lola it was a transition. I told myself it was temporary. In the morning, she made garlic rice and tuyo and scolded me for not finishing my cup of instant coffee. "Sayang," she muttered, whisking my plate away before I could offer to help. "Walang tira-tira dapat," she said it offhandedly, but I paused mid-step on my way to the door. "No leftovers?" I asked. "Especially rice," she said, not looking at me. "Never leave rice on your plate. Not overnight. Not even a grain." I blinked. "Is this a superstition thing?" Her eyes snapped to mine, sharp and firm, and her voice dropped low. "It's a rule." I laughed a little, tried to shrug it off. Okay, no leftover rice." She didn't laugh with me. I spent that day doing chores around the house, mostly fixing things she hadn't gotten around to, patching up a screen with holes, replacing 2 light bulbs, clearing out a bit of the talbos and camote that had overgrown the backyard. She offered to cook again that night, but I told her I could handle it. "I lived alone for 3 years," I said, half boasting, half apologizing. "I can cook rice." She pursed her lips but didn't argue, just handed me the caldero and said, "Make sure you eat it all." I nodded. I didn't eat it all. It wasn't on purpose. I'd underestimated how much water I put in. The rice came out soggy, a little too soft, and I lost my appetite after a few bites of adobong sitaw. I scraped most of it into a bowl and set it aside on the counter. I figured I'd eat it for breakfast. When I went to bed that night, the air felt thicker than usual. A storm was brewing, thunder murmuring off somewhere beyond the rice paddies, and the geckos clinging to the wall barked louder than I'd ever heard. I turned the electric fan on full blast and lay in bed, staring at the dark outline of the ceiling through the netting. I thought about Manila, about the small studio I used to rent, the neon haze from the 7-Eleven sign outside my window, the muffled bass of nightclub music 2 blocks away. I missed the chaos, the constant hum of life. Here, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. Somewhere around midnight, I thought I heard someone walking outside. The steps were soft, like bare feet brushing against dirt and grass. I told myself it was nothing, maybe a pusa or the neighbor's goat wandering again, but something about the rhythm of it caught my breath in my throat. Drag, step, drag, step. I held still, not even daring to turn my head toward the window. I didn't want to see what might be there. The air in the room felt like it dropped 10 degrees. A mosquito buzzed near my ear, and I swatted it on instinct, breaking the silence with a clap. The footsteps stopped. I stayed awake for what felt like hours, waiting for the wind to pick up, for the rooster to crow, for the safe pull of sunlight. I woke up late the next morning to the sound of Lola boiling water in the kitchen. I threw on a shirt and headed out, groggy, still trying to shake the heaviness in my chest. She was already setting the table when I walked in. "Morning," I muttered, rubbing my face. She nodded but didn't smile. Her eyes flicked past me, downward toward the floor. I followed her gaze. There, on the wooden slats near the counter where I'd left the rice, were faint prints, long bare feet. The toes were thin, nearly bony, and stained dark with something that looked like mud but felt too black. They were smeared just slightly, like whoever, or whatever, had stood there, hadn't moved much. The prints didn't lead out toward the back door. They faced toward me, toward my bedroom. I stared at them for a long time. I didn't say anything, neither did she. She handed me a plate of tortang talong and rice and said, "Eat while it's hot." I ate every grain. The rice bowl I'd left on the counter was gone. I didn't see it in the sink or on the dish rack. I didn't ask. We didn't talk much that day. Lola sat on the porch with her rosary, thumbing the beads in silence, while I swept the yard and tried not to glance at the edge of the rice fields. I thought I saw something once, just for a second, a flicker of white cloth moving low between the stalks, but when I looked again, it was just wind. That night I double-checked everything, locked the door, shut the windows, made sure every bite of dinner was eaten. I even washed my own plate. Lola said nothing, just nodded slightly as she blew out the candle and disappeared into her room. I tried to tell myself it had been my imagination, that maybe I'd stepped there barefoot the night before and forgot, that the prints looked longer in the morning light. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had stood in that kitchen, barefoot and waiting, long after I went to sleep, and it had been facing me. Let me know when you're ready for part 2, 1,500 words, and I'll continue seamlessly. The next few days passed with an odd sort of quiet between us. Lola didn't mention the footprints, and I didn't bring them up. I told myself I had probably tracked in something barefoot from outside and didn't realize it. Maybe I'd gotten up to get water in the middle of the night and just didn't remember. Maybe there was an explanation I hadn't thought of. But I also started washing every dish the second I was done eating. In Manila, I'd scrape leftovers into the trash or let dishes soak overnight without a second thought. There, time moved differently. Things were fast, loose, forgettable. Here, everything stuck. Smells, silence, the way you said things and who was listening. It wasn't about superstition, I told myself. It was respect. It was being a good guest. Still, that image, the long muddy footprint standing at the threshold of my door, lingered in the back of my mind like a damp stain. I kept looking over my shoulder at night, listening for that dragging sound again, but the house remained still. I started to convince myself it had been a one-time thing, whatever it was. By the end of the week, I was falling into a rhythm. Woke up early, helped sweep the yard, ran errands to the sari-sari store, and even walked down to the old basketball court, where a few local guys played late in the afternoon. They didn't know me, not really. I was the Apo ni Aling Rosa, the city boy come home because things didn't work out, but they were friendly enough. I stayed out late one night, drinking Red Horse and roasted peanuts with them while they told ghost stories I half listened to. Something about a capre in the mango trees by the Barangay Hall. Another story about a boy who found a baby crying in the river, took it home, and was never seen again. All the usual countryside stuff. By the time I got home, the lights in the house were off. Lola had already gone to bed. The front door was unlatched, as she often left it during humid nights, and I slipped in quietly, shoes in hand. I turned on the kitchen light and saw the covered pot of rice on the stove. I was buzzed enough that I felt a gnawing kind of hunger in my belly, so I opened it up, found half a bowl of cold rice, and scooped it onto a plate. There was some ginisang mungo left too, which I spooned over top without reheating it. I sat at the small table in the corner of the kitchen, the old plastic fan clicking away, and ate in silence. It tasted fine, a little bland, but that was expected when the food had been sitting for hours. I ate slowly, feeling the alcohol settle in, my limbs heavier with each bite. I didn't finish it though. A few grains clung to the side of the plate. A crusted ring of dried mungo sat where the sauce had pooled. I remember thinking, I'll wash it tomorrow and set the plate in the sink. The moment felt small, stupid, nothing to think twice about. I didn't even notice the rice I'd spilled on the counter. 2 grains, maybe 3, next to the spoon I hadn't put away. The fan was still whirring when I went to bed. The house was dim and quiet, and my feet pattered across the bamboo floor with the same creaking softness they always did. I didn't hear anything strange, not at first, but sometime around 3, I was pulled from sleep by a noise that didn't belong. It was subtle, not a bang or a cry, just a movement, something sliding, something low. I held my breath and waited. There it was again, a slow dragging sound across the sahig like rough skin moving over bamboo slats. Then a pause. Drag, stop, drag, stop. I sat up, heart knocking against my ribs, trying to blink the blur out of my eyes. The room was black except for the faint blue hue of moonlight squeezing through the slats in the wall. I told myself not to panic. I leaned over and pulled the edge of the mosquito net open just enough to peek toward the hallway. My door was closed, but not latched. It never latched right. The wood had swollen during the last typhoon years ago. Thump. Something bumped the base of the door. I froze. It didn't sound like a knock, more like something had pressed against it and leaned. There was a low creak, and for a second I imagined the old doorframe splintering from weight, not force, but persistence. The dragging resumed, softer now, heading back the way it came. It took all the courage I had to get out of bed and press my ear to the wall. Nothing. Just the occasional screech of a gecko, the shuffle of leaves outside. I didn't sleep again that night. When the first rooster crowed, I opened the door slowly and tiptoed out into the hallway. Everything looked the same. The kitchen was empty. The plate I'd left was still in the sink and the pot was still on the stove. The rice was gone, all of it. I didn't remember putting it away. Lola was already outside, bent over the plant beds, pulling weeds with a short trowel. She didn't look up when I joined her. "I forgot to do the dishes last night," I said quietly. "You forgot more than that," she muttered, and I didn't ask what she meant. That morning I swept the whole house. I don't know what I was looking for. Signs maybe, clues. The floors didn't have any muddy prints this time, but near the sink there was a faint smear. A crescent-shaped streak, like the heel of a foot dragged across the plank. I told myself it was just a shadow or a watermark from when I'd washed my hands. I didn't eat lunch. My stomach was twisted into something tight and cold. By evening, Lola had warmed up enough to speak to me more normally. She made tinola with chicken and sayote and insisted I eat 2 bowls. I did. I scraped every bit of rice from my plate and licked the spoon clean. I even wiped the rim of the sink dry after I was done washing. She seemed to approve. That night passed quietly. But the next day, I couldn't stop thinking about the dragging sound, the bump on my door, the way the house had shifted in tone, as if something had passed through and left a scent behind that only the walls could smell. I didn't want to admit how on edge I was. I told myself I was just drunk, that my nerves were raw from the job loss and the change of pace. Manila had noise distractions. Here, my brain filled the quiet with ghosts, and still, I checked the sink every night before bed. I ran my hand across the table to catch stray grains. I pressed down on the rice pot lid to be sure it was sealed. I became meticulous. Then one evening, Lola had to attend a wake in the next barangay. She left just after dusk, wearing a black shawl and carrying a Tupperware of suman. Said she'd be back by morning. "You know what to do," she told me as she stood at the doorway, her voice firm but not unkind. I nodded. "Yes, Lola. No rice left out." She didn't smile, just looked at me for a long time before stepping into the dark. I locked the door behind her. I checked every window. I turned on every available light and even brought the rice pot into my room when I was done eating. Not a single grain was left behind. But that night, I still heard the dragging, softer this time, slower. It stopped right outside my room. Then I heard a faint sound, low and rhythmic, like breathing, but it wasn't mine. I didn't move. The breathing wasn't loud, but it was close, just beyond the thin wall of woven bamboo slats that made up the hallway. It was uneven too, like whoever was out there didn't understand how to breathe properly. Wet inhales, shuddered exhales, as if lungs had forgotten how to do their job. I wanted to call out, but something in me knew better. Not fear exactly, not yet, just instinct. Like if I said something, hello, Lola, whatever, was on the other side might answer. So I waited. The breathing stopped, and then, with the slow certainty of something that didn't need to rush, I heard it turn. The dragging started again. Drag, step, drag, step. Back down the hallway, fading. I lay there until morning. When the sun finally began to push light through the slats, I climbed out of bed and opened the door. My knees popped when I stood, and I realized I'd been holding myself stiff all night, curled like a child afraid of a nightmare. But I was awake the whole time. It wasn't a dream. I hadn't imagined it. The hallway was empty. The kitchen, too. No broken glass, no doors open, no sign anyone had been inside. Until I looked at the floor. The house's bamboo floor had been polished by decades of feet. But there, pressed into the surface by something damp, were marks. Not footprints in the usual sense, not the kind with clear toes and arches, but elongated stains, as if the heel had stretched backward, as if the foot was wrong. There were 4 of them, each one about a hand's length longer than mine. They weren't muddy like the ones I'd seen before. They were faint, like moisture from a body that didn't quite dry properly. They started at the stove, where I'd set the rice pot the night before, and ended just outside my door, facing it. I stared for a long time, then slowly stepped over them, careful not to smear or disturb anything. I didn't know why. It felt like something sacred or cursed, something you didn't touch with your skin. When I got outside, I found Lola hanging clothes on the line, humming to herself, a church hymn, slow, mournful. Her fingers worked the clothespins with practiced rhythm, her back slightly hunched, like she'd been at it for hours. I cleared my throat. Lola? She didn't stop. You didn't finish the rice. My jaw tightened. I did. I brought the pot to my room. But you left 2 grains in the sink, she said, and 1 on the counter. I didn't know what to say. I hadn't even seen them. I'll clean better next time, I mumbled. It's not about cleaning. Her voice was soft now, not angry, just tired. It's about respect. I didn't respond. That afternoon, I sat on the back steps and watched the rice field sway. The wind rolled through the stalks in waves like some enormous hand brushing its fingers across the land. The sky was pale and cloudless, but I felt cold. I couldn't stop thinking about those prints, how they hadn't led away, only toward me. I told myself I'd be perfect from now on. No mistakes, no more leftover rice. I'd scrub every grain off the spoon, rinse the pot twice, check the floor. I'd follow every rule. The next 3 nights passed without incident. I made sure of it. Lola didn't say anything else about the rice, and I didn't ask. We settled into a quiet rhythm again. Me doing chores, her praying and cooking, and sometimes watching her little transistor radio play old Kundaman songs. But something lingered in the house. I felt it mostly at night, like a pressure in the air, a presence not quite here, not quite gone. It didn't make noise anymore, no dragging, no breathing. It was more like watching, waiting. Then came the 4th morning. I was washing my hands at the sink after breakfast, wiping the edge of the basin the way I always did now, when I glanced down and saw them. Footprints. Long, barefoot impressions. Damp again, faint, but clearer this time. They started at the corner of the kitchen, where the rice pot sat cooling, and stopped exactly where I was standing, facing me. My breath caught in my chest. I dropped the towel and backed away. Lola, I called. My voice cracked. She came in from the porch a few seconds later, frowning at the panic in my tone. When she saw what I was pointing at, she didn't speak. She didn't scold me, didn't say I told you so. She just sighed. Then she took the pot of rice and emptied it outside. Not into the compost bin, not to feed the chickens, just dumped it into the earth like an offering. That night she left a small white bowl on the kitchen table. Plain steamed rice, no spoon, no plate, just rice untouched. I stood in the doorway and stared at it. "What's that for?" I asked. "To see if it comes again," she said. "You're baiting it?" "I'm acknowledging it." I didn't understand what that meant. Not then. But I didn't argue. I didn't sleep well. I lay awake with my back to the wall, mosquito net tucked tight, the sound of the fan rattling like an old breath. Hours passed. I tried not to check the time. Every time I thought about moving, the memory of the prince stopped me. And then, very faint, very slow, I heard it again. Not dragging, not breathing, a different sound. Tap, tap, tap. Something knocking on the outer wall, not the door, not the window, the wall itself. Tap, tap. I sat up and leaned toward the corner of the room where the slats didn't fully reach the floor. Through the small gaps, I could just barely make out the moonlight hitting the hallway outside. The tapping stopped. Something shifted. I pressed my face to the slats and squinted, and there, just for a second, I saw them. Toes. 5 of them. Pale. Long. Too long. Pressed against the bamboo floorboards just outside my room. They weren't standing still. They were curling, twitching, slightly, as if excited. I pulled back. My heart was hammering. I held my breath and waited. No sound came. No door creak, no floor groan, just the fan ticking. I waited like that until the first hints of dawn. When I finally opened the door, the hallway was empty again. The rice bowl on the kitchen table was gone. I never saw Lola touch it. I didn't tell Lola what I'd seen. Not yet. She went about the day like normal, feeding the chickens, boiling cassava, fanning herself on the porch as if the air wasn't so thick it made your lungs work harder. I watched her from the doorway, 1 foot inside the house, 1 foot out. It felt safer that way, half in the light, half ready to run. But I wasn't going anywhere. I kept thinking about the feet, the way they'd moved, those twitching toes against the bamboo slats. They didn't walk, they hovered. Not in a floating, ghostly sense. No, there had been weight to them, a realness, a wrongness, like a body mimicking the idea of standing, getting it just slightly off. That was the night I decided to test it. I didn't tell Lola, of course. She would have stopped me. Or worse, confirmed everything I still wanted to believe was just some leftover childhood paranoia wrapped up in village folklore. I told myself I needed proof, something I could look at, hold in my hands, tell myself, this is real, this isn't just in your head. So I made a plan. After dinner, tinapa and fresh tomatoes over garlic rice, I excused myself early and told Lola I was tired. I brought my plate into the kitchen, made a show of rinsing it well, wiping the sink, drying my hands. I even said out loud, "All clean, Lola," like I was still a kid doing chores. She didn't say anything. In my room, I waited until I heard her shut her bedroom door and slide the bolt. Then I crept back into the kitchen, quietly lifted the lid of the rice pot, and spooned a generous heap of warm rice onto a saucer. I placed it on the middle of the table directly under the light bulb. No fish, no sides, just rice, white and gleaming, faintly steaming in the open air. A trap. I turned off the rest of the house lights, leaving only the kitchen bulb on. Then I went back to my room, closed the door gently, and lay on my stomach beside the bed. I'd pulled aside a few of the bamboo slats near the corner during the day, widening the natural gaps just enough that I could see a slice of the hallway if I pressed my eye close to the floor. My cheek against the wood was already sticky with sweat. I waited. An hour passed. Then 2. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. The house was too quiet. Even the insects outside had gone still. And then, tap, tap, the sound again, but closer this time, more deliberate. Not testing, approaching. I held my breath and peered through the slats. At first I saw nothing, just the base of the hallway wall, the edge of the door frame, and the faint yellow wash from the kitchen light bleeding into the dark. Then the shadow fell across the light, a shape, thin, unmoving, and slowly, too slowly, I saw it lower. Toes, not feet, just toes, curling over the edge of the hallway where the floor dipped slightly. They hung just above the slats, flexing rhythmically, like they were clenching and releasing something invisible. I didn't blink. The toes touched the bamboo. Each one was longer than it should have been. Not freakishly long, but just enough to make you stop and stare. The nails were blackened at the tips, not dirty, black like burnt keratin. The skin had a gray sheen under the yellow light, wrinkled, damp. They moved again, stepped forward, not toward the kitchen, toward me. I pressed back from the gap hard in my throat, silently crawling away from the wall like a child escaping a punishment. I climbed into bed, pulled the mosquito net down tight, and lay with the blanket clenched in my fists like it would protect me. I never heard the door open. I never heard the plate shift. But the footsteps continued, slowly pacing the hallway for hours. A soft drag, a wet pat, again and again. When morning came, I found the plate gone. I didn't say anything to Lola that day either. I was too shaken. It wasn't until late afternoon that she asked while pouring hot water into a thermos, "Did you leave rice out last night?" I froze. "No," I said. "I cleaned everything." She looked at me too long. Her eyes searched mine like she already knew the answer and just wanted to see if I would lie. She nodded once and didn't mention it again. That night, I locked my door. Not just the wooden hook latch either. I dragged the old chest in front of it too. Heavy enough to make noise if anything, tried to push through. I didn't set another trap. I didn't want to see it again. But it came anyway. Tap, 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 tap. I stayed under the blanket, eyes open, back to the wall, breathing through my mouth because I was afraid it would hear me. Something brushed the wall outside. Not a hand, not a foot. Something longer, softer, like fabric or hair. I didn't sleep. In the morning, Lola didn't ask how I slept. She just placed a small white bowl on the table again and said, "If you want to keep testing it, be ready for it to test you back." I stared at the bowl. There was no rice inside, just a single grain, clean, white, uncooked. I didn't ask her what it meant. That afternoon, I found myself walking down the dirt road that curved past the rice paddies and through the tall grass behind the barangay. I wasn't sure why. Maybe I thought I'd see something. Maybe I just needed air. But halfway down the trail, I stopped. There were footprints, pressed deep into the dirt, side by side. Barefoot, elongated. They weren't facing forward. They were facing me. I turned around and walked home without looking back. That night, I made sure everything was spotless. I washed my hands twice, cleaned the counter, checked the floors. I didn't eat much, just enough to get by, and I watched Lola move around the kitchen like she was waiting for something to break. After dinner, she sat on the porch and began humming again. The same hymn, the same flat, mournful notes. I sat beside her, staring out at the dark. Fireflies danced above the fields. Cicadas sang. It could have been peaceful, but I could feel it watching, out there, somewhere in the rice stalks, or under the floor, waiting. That's when I asked. "Lola," I said, keeping my voice low. "What is it?" She didn't stop fanning herself. "I mean it," I continued. "I've seen the footprints, heard it walking. It doesn't feel like some old ghost story. It feels real." She let out a slow breath. Then she said, "It is real." I swallowed hard. She turned toward me, face hard in the dim porch light. "There are things older than us," she said. "Older than the village, than the trees, than the language we use to speak their names." She paused. "They don't ask for much, just respect, a clean plate, nothing wasted. That's all." I stared down at my hands. "Why rice?" I asked. She looked toward the fields. "Because rice is life," she said. "We plant it, we feed it, we live by it. It remembers, it counts. And if we forget, then it watches." I didn't ask anything else. That night, I didn't leave anything out. But the footsteps still came. The next morning, Lola was already awake when I emerged from my room, looking like I hadn't slept, which, to be fair, I hadn't. My skin felt brittle, like it could flake off from tension alone. I poured hot water over instant coffee and stirred it absently, waiting for her to say something. She always did. But this time, she said nothing, just sat by the kitchen window with her rosary, murmuring prayers under her breath. Her fingers moved quickly through the beads, faster than usual. I stood there watching her for a long while, the silence between us stiff and thick, like the air before a typhoon. I finally sat down at the table and said, "Lola." She didn't look up. "Can we talk about it now?" She still didn't raise her head, but her fingers slowed. "I need to know," I said. That got her attention. She stopped entirely and folded the rosary neatly into her palm. Then she looked at me with eyes that were heavier than usual, not tired, burdened, like whatever she was about to say had been carried for years, passed down like a curse you couldn't put down. "You know the stories," she said quietly. "You heard them growing up. Some of them," I admitted. "But they were just stories." "No," she said. "They're not." She stood slowly, joints cracking, and opened the old cabinet above the kitchen sink. From behind a stack of yellowing recipe cards, she pulled out a thick envelope sealed with a loop of thread. I'd never seen her touch that cabinet before. Inside were photos, old, brittle ones, curling at the edges, faded images of people I didn't recognize. Dusty black and white portraits from decades ago, most of them taken outside, in front of this very house. She pointed at one. "That's your great-aunt Liza," she said. "She lived here after the war." The woman in the photo looked young, maybe late teens, standing barefoot in the yard, smiling, holding a chicken by the wings. Normal enough. But behind her, just barely visible near the corner of the frame, was a shadow. I leaned closer. "What is that?" Lola didn't answer. She pointed to another photo. This one was darker, grainier. A group of children squatting on the bamboo floor, bowls of rice in their hands, all of them smiling except one girl in the middle. She was staring straight at the camera, face blank, eyes wide. "That's Liza again," Lola said. "Weeks before she disappeared, my skin prickled." "She vanished?" I asked. "Not vanished," she said. "Taken." I didn't say anything. Lola gathered the photos back into the envelope and slid it under a cloth placemat on the table. Then she finally sat down across from me and looked me dead in the eye. "We have always been watched," she said. "Not just this family, this village, this land, the rice we plant, the water we use, the air that grows the stalks, it all came with something else, something that was already here." "You're talking about the Tagabante," I said, trying to keep my voice level. She nodded once. "It's not a monster," she said. "It's not even a spirit, really. It doesn't haunt. It doesn't whisper. It just waits, watches, follows. It's not angry, not jealous, not even cruel. It just remembers." I tried to swallow, but my throat was too dry. "It remembers disrespect," she said. I tried to shake the chill from my spine. "So it punishes people who leave rice behind?" Lola gave a thin, humorless smile. "That's how it starts. And how does it end?" She didn't answer. Instead, she stood again and pulled a ceramic bowl from the cabinet. She handed it to me. It was plain, white with a blue ring near the rim, and chipped slightly on one side. "This was your great-aunt's," she said. "The night before she disappeared, she left a few bites of luga in it. Just a little, not even a full spoon. And the next morning the food was gone, but the bowl was clean, like it had been licked. She didn't have to finish. I understood." I sat in silence the rest of the day, trying to understand how something so small, so ordinary, could become so dangerous. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the danger was because it was small, easy to forget, easy to ignore. That night, I ate dinner like I was in a church. Every bite was measured, chewed with reverence. I scraped the plate clean, even used my fingers to pick up stray grains from the rim. I washed every dish, dried every surface, checked the floor twice. Still, I couldn't sleep, and still the footsteps came. Not loud, not frantic, just steady. Drag, step, drag, step. They stopped outside my door, but this time I didn't hear breathing. This time I heard a sound like nails brushing the wood. Not scratching, brushing. The soft touch of something testing the grain. I gripped my pillow so tightly my fingers ached. I don't know when I finally drifted off, but I woke up sweating, tangled in the netting, my chest tight like I'd been holding my breath in my sleep. I stumbled into the kitchen and found Lola already boiling water for tea. She didn't greet me, just poured 2 cups. I sat across from her in silence. She passed me a saucer with 3 puto and pushed the sugar bowl toward me. I thought it wouldn't come. If I followed the rule, I said finally. It doesn't stop after the first time, she said. It waits. For what? For you to forget. I looked down at my tea. Is it going to stop? Lola didn't answer right away. Then she said, not unless you leave. That caught me off guard. You want me to go? I want you to live, she said. That day, I packed my things. Not everything, just the basics. A bag of clothes, my wallet, charger, and some old notebooks. I told myself I'd spend a week with my cousin in the next town over. Clear my head, let things settle. But Lola didn't stop me when I said goodbye. Didn't hug me, just handed me a bag of rice. For the road, she said. I nodded, trying to read her face, but she was already turning back toward the house. I boarded the bus that afternoon, slept most of the ride, ate nothing, but I kept the rice bag sealed tight in my backpack. I didn't last 2 nights with my cousin. He lived in a cramped duplex in a noisy part of town where tricycle engines coughed all night and dogs barked at every passing shadow. I thought the distractions would help. I thought they'd drown out the footsteps I kept hearing in my head. But it was worse somehow. The noise just gave my thoughts more space to echo. I left before sunrise on the 3rd day and caught the first bus back. I didn't call ahead. I didn't text. I just showed up, backpack slung over my shoulder, shoes covered in dust from the walk up the hill. When I reached the old house, the front gate was open, and I could smell something familiar wafting from the kitchen. Ginger, garlic, rice. Lola was sitting by the stove, stirring a pot of luga. She looked up like she'd been expecting me. I overcooked, she said simply. I dropped my bag inside the doorway and sat down at the table. Neither of us mentioned the thing I was running from, or the silence I hadn't been able to bear. That night, after 2 helpings of hot luga and fried tuyo, I offered to wash the dishes, but Lola waved me off. I'll do it. You're tired. I should have insisted. I should have gotten up, but I didn't. Instead, I went to my room and passed out almost immediately, my body sagging into the mattress like it had been waiting all day to collapse. My stomach was warm, my eyelids heavy, and for the first time in days, sleep came quickly. I didn't dream, but I woke up to the sound of breathing. This time it wasn't muffled through a wall or filtered through the mosquito net. It was close, right outside the slats beneath my bed, wet and uneven. Almost gasping, I held still. The sound didn't move for a long time. It just hovered there, low and wrong, like something half drowned. Then I heard the tap of a nail, or something like one, lightly scratching the underside of the floor. Slow, lazy. I rolled over slowly and pulled the edge of the netting aside. There was no light in the room. I had forgotten to turn on the lamp, but the moon outside was full enough that thin white lines pushed through the gaps in the wall. That's when I saw it. A shadow, thin, hunched, passed across the light coming through the doorway. Not Lola. Too tall, too slow. I held my breath. Then came the sound of something dragging. Not feet, something soft and slick, like wet rope being pulled across dry wood. I stared at the door, praying it wouldn't creak, that whatever it was would keep walking past. But it didn't. It stopped, and I saw the handle twitch. Once, then twice. It didn't open, but something leaned against it. I could hear it breathing again. It stayed there for what felt like an hour, just waiting, just breathing. Then slowly, so slowly, I heard it retreat. The dragging softened, the floor stopped creaking, and silence crept in behind it like fog. I didn't move until morning. When the first rays of sun slipped through the wall, I forced myself to get up, open the door, and step into the hallway. There, on the floor, was a single wet print. Not a full footprint, just the heel. But pressed into the wall just beside it, clear and dripping, was a handprint, not a normal one. The fingers were long, disproportionate. The thumbs stretched too low, and it wasn't muddy this time. It was black, like something had oozed onto the wall. The smell hit me a second later, musty, metallic, like wet soil and rust. Lola was already in the kitchen. She looked up, saw my face, and said nothing. "I left rice," I whispered. "Last night." She turned off the stove. "I thought you said you washed." "I didn't. I let you do it. I fell asleep." Her lips pressed together. "I forgot," I said. "I wasn't trying to break the rule. I just forgot." "That's worse," she said softly. "Forgetting means it's already working." I sat at the table, head in my hands, the image of that handprint burned into the back of my eyelids. "Why did it touch the wall?" I asked. "Why now?" "It's coming closer," she said. "Because it thinks it's allowed." "It thinks?" Lola hesitated, then said, "It learns you." "What does that mean?" "It listens," she said. "It watches. It waits. Then it starts to know the sound of your feet, the way you chew, how you breathe." I stared at her. "You're saying it's studying me?" She nodded. "Because I left rice out? Because you invited it. I didn't eat much that day. I couldn't." My stomach twisted every time I closed my eyes. I kept seeing that handprint, kept imagining those fingers reaching between the slats and curling under my bed. I spent the afternoon scrubbing the hallway floor. Lola didn't stop me. I used Osakol and hot water and an old bunot, scrubbing until the planks shone again. The handprint didn't come off all the way. Even after 3 passes, a faint stain remained, like the wood had absorbed it. That night I ate early. A small bowl of rice, no leftovers. I washed everything myself, scraped every last grain into my mouth, scalded the spoon, even wiped down the counter with vinegar. When I finished, Lola stood beside me and nodded, but she didn't look relieved. She looked sad. "You won't be able to keep this up forever," she said. "I can try," I told her. She walked away without another word. That night I moved my mattress into the center of the room and slept with a flashlight in one hand and the bolo knife in the other. I told myself I wouldn't fall asleep, but sometime past midnight the flashlight flickered. Then I heard it, breathing, right beneath me. The breathing faded just as the flashlight sputtered back to life. A few dim flickers, then a solid glow. I swept the beam across the floor, the corners, the walls, but the room was empty. I stayed up until morning, gripping the bolo tight, afraid to even blink. At sunrise I found no prints this time, no handprints, no smudges, but the feeling lingered, like something had passed through and chosen not to leave a mark. That scared me more than anything. Later that morning I walked into the barangay to find Paolo. He was one of the few people I still remembered from childhood, 2 years older, lean and sharp-eyed, the type who knew every shortcut through the paddies and every name buried in the cemetery. He worked maintenance at the church now, fixed broken pews and patched the roof after typhoons. When I found him sitting by the small store with a cigarette between his fingers, I didn't waste time. "I need help," I said. He looked me up and down. "Looks like it, I think." I hesitated. Something followed me. He raised an eyebrow but didn't laugh. "You're staying at your Lola's place, right?" I nodded. "She's the one with the rice rule," he said. "I remember that. She used to yell at us when we'd leave banana leaves with bits still stuck to them." "It's not just a rule," I said. "It's something real." I told him everything, or almost everything, enough for him to go quiet and stub out his cigarette in the dirt. When I finished, he looked toward the mountains. "My Lolo used to say the Tagabante doesn't just show up," he said. "It roots itself, like a weed. The first offense is just an opening. If it gets past 3, what happens? It stops knocking." That phrase hung in the air like a noose. "What can I do?" I asked. He looked thoughtful. There's something I saw once, an old method. It's not a solution, but a way to test if it's really there. I know it's there. Then we can try to trap it. That afternoon, Paolo came to the house carrying a small woven bag and a serious look. Inside were strips of coconut husk, a vial of salt, a coil of dried sampaguita, and something that looked like powdered bone. We waited until dusk. Lola said nothing, just watched him silently as he spread the husk fibers in a circle in the center of the kitchen. It has to be where it enters, he muttered. Near the rice, I said. Always near the rice. He poured a ring of salt around the husk, then placed the flowers inside it and tapped 4 points with the bone powder. Lola stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, eyes dark. This isn't a game, she said. I'm not treating it like one, Paolo said without looking up. She didn't speak again. But when she left the room, the air felt heavier. Now we wait, he said. We turned off all the lights except one, the bare kitchen bulb that hung above the center of the trap. The rice pot was empty and scrubbed. The sink was spotless, no food anywhere. We made sure. Around 10, Paolo began humming softly. Something low, a kind of droning tune. He said it helped mask his thoughts, helped him stay calm. I sat at the table with the flashlight off, heart pounding, ears straining for every creak of wood. Around midnight, I heard the floor shift. Not footsteps, just weight, as if something had lowered itself from the ceiling or pulled itself up from the soil under the house. Paolo stopped humming. We looked at each other. The kitchen bulb flickered once, then again. I reached for the flashlight, but Paolo grabbed my arm and shook his head. The light flickered a third time, dimmed, then returned. I exhaled shakily. Then we heard it, a soft scrape across the floorboards, slow, dry, like nails against a tomb wall. The bulb above us dimmed again, and for a split second, we saw something just beyond the trap, a shape, low to the ground, unmoving, but it was there, a suggestion of limbs, of something crouched and waiting. Paolo whispered, "Don't move." The light blinked again, then held. The trap sat in the center of the kitchen, untouched. The shape hadn't moved. I could feel its eyes, but I didn't know where they were. I couldn't even tell if it had eyes. The air smelled sweet and rotten, like fermenting fruit. I swallowed bile and stayed frozen. Paolo reached slowly into his pocket, pulled out a small candle stub and lit it. The flame shivered but held. He placed it beside the trap. The figure shifted. Not forward. Up. It stood. No sound. No step. Just vertical movement. Like something being lifted by invisible strings. The bulb above the trap burst. The kitchen plunged into darkness. The candle went out. I heard Paolo inhale sharply. Then, nothing. "Paolo?" I whispered. No response. I flicked on my flashlight. The trap was intact, the flowers unmoved, the salt ring undisturbed. But Paolo was gone. His chair was still there, slightly tilted back like he just stood. The candle was cold. The door was closed. I got up and stumbled out onto the porch. The night was thick and wet. Crickets chirped. Frogs croaked. Then I saw him, standing at the edge of the rice field, barefoot, staring straight ahead. His shirt was soaked. His hands hung limp. His eyes looked off. I called to him. He didn't move. I jogged toward him, heart racing, flashlight bobbing. He didn't blink. "Paolo," I said. "Hey." He turned slowly, but his expression didn't change. "What happened?" I asked. He didn't answer. His eyes moved past me, toward the house. Then he said, in a voice that wasn't his, "It knows your name." I stepped back. "Say that again?" But he didn't repeat it. He blinked like waking up from a long nap, shivering as if soaked to the bone. "Gabe?" he asked. His voice was his own again. What the hell just happened?" I said. He rubbed his arms. "I don't know, I was inside, then I wasn't. You said something, it knows your name." He stared at me. I didn't say anything. He didn't stay long after that, said he had to go home, had to rest. I offered to walk him, but he insisted. He avoided my eyes as he left, didn't say goodbye. When I went back inside, the husk circle had collapsed into itself. The salt was gone. Not scattered, gone. I couldn't stop thinking about what Paolo said. It knows your name. Whether or not he remembered saying it didn't matter. Something had used his voice, worn it like skin, spoken a truth I hadn't wanted to hear. This thing, the Tagabante, it wasn't just some lurking shape anymore. It wasn't reacting to accidents or watching for broken rules. It had marked me. The salt trap had failed. The flowers hadn't even wilted. They just disappeared. One moment there, the next gone. I didn't know if that meant the entity had taken them or if it no longer needed to acknowledge them at all. I scrubbed the floor again that morning, poured boiling water into the seams between the bamboo slats. I washed my hands with vinegar, cleaned the kitchen twice. I counted the grains of rice that stuck to the spoon, 3, and scraped them into my palm to eat. Lola said nothing, but she watched me from the doorway. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I didn't want to risk anything. I told Lola I had a headache and went straight to bed before the sun had even fully set. She didn't argue, just nodded and sat back down at the altar with her rosary, like she already knew what was coming. Sleep didn't come easily. My skin buzzed with an inner hum I couldn't turn off. My pulse was loud in my ears. I lay there in the dark, flashlight in one hand, the bolo knife beside me under the blanket, and stared at the ceiling. Around 1:30 in the morning, I started to feel sick. My stomach churned like something was shifting inside it. Hot and cold flashes washed over me, followed by a thick nausea that forced me upright. I stumbled to the kitchen, flicked on the dim light bulb above the sink, and reached for a glass. The floor tilted. I dropped the glass. It shattered against the concrete step outside the kitchen door. I bent down to pick up the shards and paused. The rice pot was on the counter, closed. I stared at it. I hadn't touched it all day. I hadn't eaten. I was sure Lola hadn't either. She'd been fasting again, part of the Novenario cycle for her cousin who'd passed months ago. But I could smell it. Steam, rice, cooked, fresh, warm. My stomach flipped again. I opened the lid. Inside was a small portion of white rice shaped into a rough ball, resting on a banana leaf. Something about it made my legs weak. It wasn't the rice itself. It was the way it had been placed, too careful, too deliberate, like it had been made for someone, or something. I backed away from the counter and turned to leave, only to find the kitchen door wide open. The wooden latch that normally stuck shut was swinging in the air, tapping softly against the door frame. A breeze slipped through, carrying the thick scent of earth, and something else, rot. Something was in the house. I didn't wait. I ran to my room, slammed the door, locked it, dragged the old chest against it, and dropped to my knees beside the mattress. My heart was in my throat. It wasn't about rice anymore. That's what hit me then. As I lay there in the dark, the bolo clutched in one hand, the flashlight pressed to my chest like a lifeline. I'd followed the rule. I'd eaten everything. I'd cleaned and counted and apologized, but it was already inside. The rule had been broken enough. It wasn't about individual grains anymore. It was about the breach, the opening, and now it didn't need permission. It had been learning me. The door handle rattled once. I froze. The chest groaned under a sudden weight. Not slamming, just leaning, testing. Then came the sound I feared most. The creak of wood as the bottom corner of the door bent slightly inward, not splintering, just warping, shifting under pressure. I didn't shout. I didn't cry out. I just pressed my hand to my mouth and lay flat on the floor. The flashlight flickered. I turned it off. Total darkness. The door groaned again. And then, with a slow creak that drilled into my spine, it opened. The chest slid forward slightly as the pressure eased. The air changed. Not cooler, just denser, like something else had entered the room, something that shouldn't have fit. I didn't see it. Not yet, but I heard it. The breathing. Wet. Wrong. Louder than before. Inside now. Inside the room. A slow dragging sound moved across the floor toward me. It passed the bed. moved closer to the window, then back again, pacing. I squeezed the knife hilt so tightly my hand cramped. Then it stopped, right in front of me. I could feel it standing there, watching. And then I heard the whisper, not in my ears, in my head. Leave one behind. My entire body locked. The voice wasn't mine, wasn't Lola's, wasn't even human. It was like wind in a graveyard. It echoed without sound. Leave one behind. A grain, a bite, an offering. That's all it wanted, or claimed to want. But I knew better now. That was just the beginning. The voice faded. The presence retreated. When I finally dared to flick the flashlight back on, the door was open. The hallway was empty. The chest hadn't even moved that far, just a few inches. But I hadn't pushed it. I walked back into the kitchen. The rice pot was empty. Banana leaf gone. No dishes disturbed. No sign of entry, except for the wet footprint on the floor. Just one. It didn't face the door this time. It faced the table, as if it had sat there, waited, eaten. I went to Lola's room. She was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, fingers curled around her rosary, muttering prayers too fast to understand. "Lola," I said. She looked up at me like she already knew. "It doesn't care if I follow the rule now," I said. "I know," she said. "You knew it wouldn't stop." "I hoped it would," she whispered. "But I knew." I sat beside her. "What do I do?" She didn't answer, just reached for the edge of her nightstand drawer and pulled something out. A folded piece of paper. Inside was a list, not written in her handwriting. Old ink, yellowed corners, 8 names. Each name had a small mark beside it, all except the last one. Gabriel. No mark, just space. It came for each of them, she said. "This isn't a warning list," I said. "It's a roll call." She nodded. "I broke the rule," she said, "once. When I was a girl. My mother stopped it, blocked it. But I knew when I had you, it might return. It remembers the bloodline." I stared at the list again. "Then it was always going to come." She nodded once. I sat back in silence, and somewhere deep inside I felt it. The shift, the understanding. It wasn't about rice anymore. It was about debt. Lola didn't speak to me the rest of that day. She moved quietly, precisely, as if following steps in a dance only she remembered. At noon, she lit 3 sticks of incense and placed them in a small bowl of rice just beside the back window. She didn't eat. She didn't rest. She only worked. I followed her around the house, unsure if I was helping or just getting in the way. She cleaned out the altar, replaced the Santo Niño's cracked glass with a sheet of plastic, and scrubbed the wooden floor until the grain bled dark water. Then, just before sunset, she stood in the kitchen and laid out the offering. I'd never seen her do anything like it before. She removed a small pouch from the bottom drawer, the kind she used to keep beetle nut in when I was a child, and placed it beside a bowl of freshly steamed white rice. She sliced a thumb-sized wedge of ginger and dropped it into the pot. Then she pricked her finger with a sewing needle. The blood came slow, thick, a single droplet that she let fall onto the rice. "Lola," I said, stepping forward. She held up her hand, not in anger, not to silence me, to protect me. "You need to stay in your room tonight," she said, her voice thin but firm. "You'll hear things. You'll want to come out. But you must not open that door. I don't." "No matter what you hear," she repeated. "If you open the door, it'll take both of us." My hand shook. "You don't have to do this." She looked at me, and for the first time in weeks I saw fear in her face, not for herself. "For me, yes I do," she said. "You were only the last to break the rule, not the first." She brushed a hand over my cheek. "I should have left with your mother when she begged me to move to the city. But this house, this place, it holds too much. It remembers too much." She closed her eyes for a moment, and then, without another word, placed the bowl, the pouch, and the folded banana leaf on the center of the floor. Then she lit a candle and blew out all the lights. I stood in the hallway, my legs refusing to move, as she closed the kitchen door behind her and slid the wooden latch into place. I wanted to beg her again, but something in me knew it would be useless. That night I waited in my room, just like she told me. The house was too still. Even the usual sounds, the wind through the grass, the frogs in the canal, the bamboo creaking in the rafters, were gone. It was like everything outside had gone mute, holding its breath. Then the dragging started, soft at first, from the back door. It scraped across the floor, passing the window, brushing the bamboo walls. Then it stopped. I heard Lola's voice, not speaking, chanting. It was an old language, older than Cebuano, older than anything I'd heard her say in church or prayer. Her voice trembled but didn't break. She repeated it again and again, a pattern of sound that didn't make sense to me but felt rhythmic, ritualistic. The Tagabante came anyway. I heard the door unlatch, not broken, just opened. Then the dragging entered the house. I covered my mouth with both hands. Lola's chant rose in pitch, then stopped. Silence. Then the sound of feet, not barefoot, not Lola's usual steps, heavier, slower, wet. Each one came with a soft squelch, like something with open wounds stepping onto the wood. Then I heard her speak, clear this time. Take it and go. Another silence. Then she screamed. It wasn't long, just one sharp cry that cut through me like broken glass. Then came the dragging again, faster now, shuffling, like something enormous and hunched moving backward out the way it came. Then nothing, no footsteps, no whispering, not even breath, just nothing. I sat there on the floor, knees to my chest, mouth open but silent, trying not to break. I don't remember falling asleep, but I woke with the first orange light of dawn slipping through the wall slats. My room was undisturbed. The fan still whirred in the corner. The mosquito net lay crumpled near the bed frame. Outside, a rooster crowed once and stopped. I stood slowly, opened my door, and walked into the hallway. The kitchen door was ajar, no latch, no resistance. I pushed it open. Inside, the table had been moved. Chairs knocked over. The offering bowl was gone. But beside the counter, right where Lola had stood the night before, were two slippers. Her slippers neatly placed, and in front of them wet footprints. Long, too long. They trailed out through the back door, across the bamboo slats, and disappeared into the grass beyond the porch. The candle she'd lit was still there, burned down to a blackened stub. I followed the footprints outside, but they didn't last long. By the time I reached the rice field, there was nothing left. No trail, no broken stalks, nothing, just air, heavy and still. I called her name, once, twice, no answer. I walked back inside. Something had been left on the table, not the bowl, not her rosary, just a single grain of rice. I stared at it for a long time, heart barely beating. It hadn't been there before. It wasn't part of the offering. It was something else, a message or a warning. I didn't touch it, didn't sweep it away. I left it there until the sun reached its highest point, and then I packed my bag and left. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't lock the door. I didn't even turn off the lights, because I knew she wasn't coming back. And I knew I wasn't safe just because I'd left. The debt wasn't paid. It had only been delayed. I moved to the city 2 weeks after Lola disappeared. I didn't go to her funeral. There wasn't one. There was no body to bury. I left the house how I found it, open, her slippers by the door, the offering table cleared. I packed my bag, left the keys under the Santo Niño, and walked to the terminal without saying goodbye to anyone. The neighbors didn't ask questions. Maybe they knew better. I found a small studio in Quezon City. Cheap, cracked tiles, low ceiling, no stove, just a single-burner electric hob and a mini fridge. No windows in the kitchen, which suited me just fine. I only unpacked what I needed, clothes, toiletries, and one photograph of Lola when she was young. It stayed on the shelf above the rice cooker. I never touched it. I started working at a small print shop downtown. Paid minimum wage, but it was quiet, predictable. Nobody asked about my family. Nobody asked where I was from. I liked it that way. For a while, I was careful, obsessively so. I ate every grain, Never left dishes overnight. Washed the counter 3 times a day. I even started buying rice in small packets instead of sacks, just enough for a day or two. I stopped using plates entirely, ate straight from the pot. Some nights I didn't eat at all, because I knew what was waiting, or maybe who. But even with all the precautions, even after uprooting everything and starting over, it found me. It was a Thursday when I noticed the first sign. I'd come home late from work. A new guy at the shop had forgotten to lock the roller gate and we had to stay to reset the alarm codes. I was tired, sweating from the walk home, and barely paying attention as I set down my bag, kicked off my shoes, and started the rice cooker. I turned on the fan and lay on the couch while it steamed. When I came back to the kitchen 20 minutes later, the pot was empty, clean, still warm. I stared at it for a full minute, trying to remember if I'd absent-mindedly eaten and forgotten. But my stomach was hollow, my mouth dry. My spoon was still sitting untouched on the counter. I didn't hear anything, but the silence felt thick. That night, I turned every light on, slept with the TV playing static, but the feeling was already back. That low, crawling sensation along the edge of my spine, the sense that the corners of the room were too deep, that something waited just outside the reach of the light. The next day I found footprints, not muddy this time, not wet, just pressure, faint, elongated indentations on the kitchen vinyl. They started beside the fridge and faced the couch, where I'd slept. I didn't leave the apartment for 3 days. I called in sick. I ate nothing but crackers. No rice. No rice meant no leftovers, right? But it wasn't about that anymore. I knew that. Lola had told me, too late, that the rule wasn't about food. It was about debt. I'd inherited it, like a title. A curse passed from one generation to the next. I could scrub floors, bleach spoons, count every grain 1,000 times, it didn't matter. The moment I broke the rule, the door opened. And Lola had only bought me time. I thought about leaving the country, flying somewhere, anywhere, but I couldn't afford it. And something told me it wouldn't matter anyway. Airports had kitchens. Airplanes served rice. It would follow. It had followed. It knew my name. That was the part that kept haunting me. Paolo's blank eyes in the field, that voice he didn't remember using. It knows your name, as if the thing needed only that, as if the rice had been a formality, a contract, signed in carelessness, sealed in blood. I didn't try to fight it. Didn't call a priest. Didn't light any candles or spread salt. I just stopped resisting. 3 nights ago, I cooked a small bowl. One last time, I set the table. No banana leaf, no offerings, just a plate, 1 spoon, 1 grain left behind, set carefully near the center. I waited. Nothing came. No knocking, no breathing, no dragging. But the lights dimmed. The apartment felt smaller, and I heard something shift behind the walls. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't eat either. The rice stayed untouched on the plate, that single grain gleaming like a tooth in the dark. Last night, I moved the plate to the center of the floor, turned off the fan, shut off the lights, and waited again. This time the grain was gone by morning. The spoon had moved 6 inches to the left, and the floor beneath the table, where the pot had sat, was sticky. Not wet, sticky, like the air had sweated. I went to work today like nothing had happened. I smiled. I printed receipts. I handed out flyers. But I knew tonight would be the last. I left early, stopped at the market for a single cup of uncooked rice, came home, boiled it, washed the spoon, cleaned the floor, swept under the fridge. Then I sat at the table and stared at the pot. It's full now, hot, fresh, smells perfect, but I won't eat it, not tonight. Instead, I tipped the pot over and let the rice spill across the linoleum. The sound it made, soft, like dry earth falling onto a coffin, echoed in my chest. I grabbed the bolo from beneath the bed. It's the same one I brought from the province. Lola had sharpened it for me before I left. Just in case, she said. I think she knew it would come to this. Now I sit here, in the center of the room, the lights off, the plate empty. The rice spreads out across the floor like an invitation, like a map. I can feel it already. The shift in pressure, the cold beneath the door. Something's outside, closer than it's ever been. The hallway is silent, but I can hear the faintest sound behind the wood. Something leaning, something scraping. Once, twice, scrape, scrape. It doesn't knock anymore. It doesn't need to. It's already inside. I grip the bolo. The floor creaks softly. The door handle twitches. Once, twice, and now it opens.